Hi everyone, Kathy Beltran with Sacred Dance with Trance. I'm super excited today to have fellow member Sheila French with us. Sheila is a trance clairvoyant medium teacher, and she has her own school called Ursham Star School of Mediumship and Psychic Courses, and this is in Folkestone, Kent. Sheila, I'm so happy to have you here today. Welcome, and thank you again for being here with us today, sharing your story.
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I've watched it often, and it's lovely to now be able to take part.
Oh my goodness, thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, guys, in order to connect with Sheila, her website will be in the comments section, or I'm sorry, the post, when I release this interview, and it is www.urshamstar.co.uk.
That's right.
Perfect.
Well done.
Sheila, we always start out at the very beginning. Everybody loves to hear how somebody got into this, your mediumship started. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
I think it's nice your question says, tell me a little bit, because my story is little. And actually, I love to say to students that my story wasn't amazing. It was ordinary, because then it shows you that anybody can try this. Anybody can come into it. So I was a late starter. So I was 21. I was a practicing Christian, Sunday school teacher and all sorts. Then I got married and stepped away from that. And then very sadly, my mother-in-law, my husband's mother, had motor neuron disease. You call it ALS, a wicked illness, no treatment all those years ago. We're talking of more than 30 years ago. And she was introduced to a spiritualist healer. Didn't know what one was, but when you're desperate and there's no other treatment, you give it a go. And so that was my introduction. And she passed very sadly in 1.5 years. And we went to the local spiritualist church for some messages to see that she was where we were being told she was and that she was okay. And then very slowly, just really very slowly, I began to meet more people who knew mediumship, something I knew nothing about. So I joined a local circle. I knew nothing about nothing. And 2 weeks later, I was given the opportunity to go to the Arthur Findlay College at Stansted. Many of your viewers will know that well. And I arrived there and I just went twice a year and I learnt it. And I began a little circle just with 3 friends, and we sat there, and slowly through my trance mediumship, through the teaching of the guide, I learnt mediumship and went on to teach at the Arthur Findlay College for many years. Too busy for that now, but the spirit world taught me. So there was never this flash of lightning. There was never this, the spirit world walked into my bedroom and said, we need you, come with us. None of these wonderful stories. I learned it like you would learn any subject. And I have to let you into a bit of a secret. I wasn't a very good student. I used to get very frustrated and impatient with myself. And I used to be the one that asked all the awkward questions. And I never accepted anything simply. I had to test it and prove it. So it was quite a hard journey, really. But I like that story because it actually says you don't have to be someone special. You don't have to be born with a marvelous gift, You can just learn it. And I did that. And probably for about 5 or 6 years, it was just hard work. And then things began to blossom. And through my trance mediumship, and I was very blessed, I met the guide the very first time I ever sat. Didn't know that's who he was, didn't know that's what he was, didn't know anything. I just had a weird experience. But I met him the very first time I sat, and he taught me. And he's been with me ever since. So it's all his good work, really, and his patience, nothing to do with me.
Well, I think it was like meant to be. I mean, it doesn't matter how old you start, you know, it just happens. And, you know, a lot of people have the story where they, as a child, or they wait like me, and mine was later, you know, so I think that's a beautiful, beginning, you know, an introduction to this. And you made me laugh about not being a good student.
I really wasn't.
Everything. Oh my goodness. No, it's beautiful, beautiful story.
If I walked into my own class now as a teacher, I would probably tell the old me off and say, stop messing around, get on with it.
Oh my goodness. So I love doing these interviews because we get to, you know, I get to talk to such amazing people, and they're sharing their story, and they're answering these questions. All the questions come from the members, because if it was just up to me, which you would see in the very beginning of all my interviews, I barely had the questions. And so I love having the members help me with this. And we get new members in the group all the time. And so they're going back to like the first or second interview. And they've all changed, you know, as we progress. But we always like to start out at the beginning with, what is trance mediumship? What is trance healing or trance speaking, whichever one you want to describe or help to help others understand more about.
You know, I like the fact that you mentioned that you've interviewed lots of people, Kathy, because one thing we have to say about trance, above any other form of mediumship, it is a very individual progression, very individual, because it works through the personality, it works through the mind of the medium. So all of us that speak with you will have very different stories, very different opinions to share. But the one thing that for me as a teacher that is important for people to understand is that trance mediumship is mind-to-mind communication. Nothing weird, nothing uncomfortable, nothing scary. It is just the closest form of inspiration that can exist. And if we can be inspired by the night sky, by the rain on the window, by the colour of someone's clothes, we can also be inspired by a personality. And we're just, through our training, allowing our mind to be closely inspired. But, you know, I think something that's very important to say when we talk about the mind, Kathy, is that I have many, many students come to me who are learning trance but are scared of it. Yeah. They're scared of what's going to happen, scared of this control that the spirit world have. And I always say one thing to them: the medium is in control of giving up control. So therefore, everything we do as mediums, we choose to do and we choose to allow to do. That makes it beautiful. That makes it, you know, I always describe it as the best spiritual cuddle that you can ever have, spiritual hug that you can ever have, you know? You just say, I will immerse myself in this loving feeling and I will do whatever is necessary to do the job well. And so for me, it's very straightforward. I love doing what I do. The spirit world choose to work with me. And in cooperation, we have this close inspiration. For me, that involves trance healing, for which I include speaking and movement, and trance speaking. And the speaking comes in many different ways, of course. But I can honestly say whenever I work in trance, I feel better afterwards, and it's the best feeling in the world while I'm doing it.
I think the energy is beautiful. I mean, when you said it was like a cuddle, yes, to me it's like, oh my God, it's so lovely.
Oh, you know? It gets a bit addictive, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. And, you know, every interview that I've done, I love how you said that in the beginning. You made sure everybody is different. Everybody describes it in a different way. And all the different members will relate more to one or be inspired by another. So that's why I do it, because it's not all the same. Everybody has a way, you know? So I'm so glad that you described it. That was very beautiful. How long have you been doing this, Sheila?
So, although I only look 21, I'm sure you would agree.
Yes,
I've been doing it for 29 years now.
oh.
So, the very first time I sat at the Arthur Findlay College, I met the guide that I've worked with throughout. So it's been a long friendship, and I think he's got more patience than I have.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing that you met him the very first, when you first started sitting,
Yeah. Although I didn't realise that at the time. It was just a strange feeling at the time, but I later understood it.
Later. I always ask this, but usually when somebody's been teaching for that long, they're doing that. Are you currently still sitting in a home circle?
I don't, I'm afraid. My teaching schedule now, I travel extensively, so my teaching schedule prevented me. My own circle sacked me. They got rid of me because I was never there, which I did understand.
Oh yeah. But you know what? You're teaching and even just to get this interview, we had to go with dates and your availability. Did you start, you talk about forming a circle, a home circle. Did you start by developing, was sitting in the power important?
Very much so. We didn't have a teacher for our circle. We didn't have a circle leader. We started off with 16, and I think within about 4 sittings, we were down to 3 of us. That was all that was left, as often happens with circles. So we were a bit the blind leading the blind, really. So I would go to the college for a week, twice a year, come back with exercises, which we would then use in the group and practice within the group. And we would always begin with a sitting in the power. Now, sitting in the power for me, I was taught many years ago, probably something like about 28 years ago, by a yoga teacher at the Arthur Findlay College, a lady called Maharaj Swami Dharmananda, who I later went on to study with. Not yoga, but the links between the breath and mediumship. And she, for me, created sitting in the power, and then there were other versions of it. And it was really based upon understanding your own power and how that power could then link with spirit power. Interestingly, Kathy, we would sit with her yoga students who weren't interested in mediumship, but they would come to teach us meditation. And they would have what's called the siddhis. And the siddhis are all the mediumship experiences that we look for: seeing spirit world, feeling them, hearing them, being at one with them. And they would have those experiences naturally, just by the use of the breath. Then they would go to Swami afterwards and they would say, "I'm so sorry, Swami. I've had the siddhis. It distracted me from the meditation." And she would say, "Go and do some 3-hour practice and get the discipline back." And I kept saying, "But that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for." And she said, "Now you know why I'm teaching you as the yoga students. You can use it. They're not going to use it." And so the mediumship at that time was taught to me that you could develop all your skills of mediumship just by sitting in the power. And sadly, again, that's another discipline that I've lost along the way through lack of time. But there was a time that I would sit every day for an hour. But
a lot of people say that in the beginning they sat for an hour. And as teachers, when I talk to more teachers, they're not in their home circle anymore because they're constantly teaching and traveling and doing all these things. Well, I mean, either way. But I loved how you said the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody that I've talked to that before this group that we're starting, trying to figure out how to do this, they felt exactly like that. And then they had to reach out and go to classes and things like that to help them feel more like they were doing something in the circle, So these interviews.
What's really important, I think, in a circle is not is someone knowledgeable, is someone a teacher, but that everybody in the circle is honest with each other. because then you can have quality feedback from your experiences, and then you learn by your experiences. So the spirit world can teach you. If somebody's in there saying, I'm the best, or I know everything, or this is what we should do, it leaves less space for the influence of the spirit world. So as long as you're honest, I experienced this, or I didn't experience anything at all, then actually the spirit world can lead the circle very well. Without a format. You just give them your 2 hours or 3 hours a week, and the spirit world will use it. It's not about being friends or being the same level in a circle. It's being able to communicate within the circle. Not going home and saying, I wish so-and-so hadn't done that, and I wish I'd told them I'd felt this. I think if the circle communicates with each other, then actually you can manage without a teacher. You know? And so many people now come to me and say, I live in a place where I can't create a circle. I don't know anybody, you know. My daughter, interestingly, runs a development circle for mediumship, clairvoyant mediumship. And they do a Skype circle, 4 different countries, all on Skype. Yeah. And they even practice trance occasionally with each other. Although primarily they practice their evidential mediumship. Not my world. This is about as technical as I can get. But you don't need to all live in the same town to have a circle these days.
No, that's my story. Mediumship circle, mental mediumship, and then trance. So yeah, I totally get that. And so that's why I talk about, you know, you can do this online. You can, instead of, you know, if you don't have a place like here, I don't have that around me here. So yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. So the meditation, is meditation important?
I think we have to look at what is meditation, because, you know, Western beliefs, most of the meditations we do in the West are what I call exercises. You know, I have 5 CDs of my own that I've produced, but really they're all exercises. You know, one is based on sitting in the power, but it's an exercise with an expectation of what you might achieve in that exercise. But true meditation is just giving yourself over to whatever experience comes. And I think there's greater value in that, because then you get the inspiration of the spirit world. And you could learn one-to-one, just sitting by yourself with the company of the spirit world. But then you've got to trust it, haven't you? That's the problem. Without feedback, you've got to trust you're not going crazy and that you really did have that experience. So absolutely. I mean, every workshop I ever do has a strong content of meditation in it.
Well, we're definitely going to have to get the name of the CDs. Are you still, I didn't realize that you had the CDs, Sheila.
I'm going to put them online. You're on my list to do on my office desk.
Good, because I know members are going to be commenting, what are the name of the CDs? Where can I get them? So I'm definitely going to have that as well.
And one that's quite useful is one of the CDs is 3 different methods to go into trance as well.
Ooh, okay.
So,
are these like the actual CDs or digital?
At the moment, actual CDs, we're working on a digital form, but I think, like everything else on my to-do list, that's quite a way down. But the CDs are there and can be posted at the moment.
Okay, perfect. I will definitely make sure that this is in the post as well, guys.
I'll let you know straight away.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so some people use music or mantras, or they use mantras. Is this something that you do?
It's something I did. I used to do a lot of breath work, pranayama work. I would say that I still use the breath to go into trance. Even when I'm sitting for the physical, I still use the breath, but maybe not in such a constructive way as I used to use it. And I think the methods, the tools that you use for going into trance are really very, very individual. You know, I know one of the wonderful threads that you had was what music do people use for going into physical, into deeper trance. And for me, we found it was one note in one song that created the right frequency. And because I've been working with the universities quite a lot for understanding brain function and brain frequency within mediumship and trance, I realise now that music can have a value for some people because it can create that correct brainwave that allows the closer inspiration. Very personal though, Kathy, particularly mantras, very personal, you know. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong. What is right for one person could be completely wrong for another. But I love music. I've always used music.
When people started commenting on the post, I tried some of that music and that song is not doing it for me. Or, so I tried different ones, but I have my own and I have to stick with that until I grow from there. But it is interesting. Now, just so you guys know, right now we are doing a part 1 interview with Sheila because Sheila also sits for physical. So we are going to do this. Otherwise, we might have like a 2-hour interview. So, so this one will be about trance mediumship, and the second part 2 will come at a later date. Will be about physical. So I'm super excited to do this with Sheila. Okay, I'm just making sure. In your circle, when you were first doing the circle, and remember, there's so many beginners coming into the group. I think you mentioned that at the beginning of each circle, you sat in the power. That was something you did every time?
Every circle. We would sit for maybe 45 minutes in a 2-hour circle. And then we would choose either to look at mediumship, mental mediumship, looking at evidence, or we would look at the trance. And then very quickly it was established that I was the only one that was really interested in trance. So then it became a circle where they sat for me. So it naturally changed, over a period of time to being a development circle for my own work, where the 2 ladies would sit and they would hear the spirit world talking, they would ask questions, they would give feedback from their experience. And interestingly, Kathy, their mediumship was never strong. Their ability to see energy or understand energy, they just built an ordinary relationship with the spirit world that came through me. So they would question the spirit world just the same as you're questioning me, just with their logical thoughts, without using mediumship at all. And a lot of beginners think that to be safe, you have to have a medium observing you. And actually all you need is someone with a bit of common sense. If you've got someone who's going to be honest and they've got common sense, it doesn't matter if they're not a medium.
It is true. Honesty in a circle. It's very, very important, Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think you're the only person, if I recall right, that has brought that up and made that an important thing, because it's absolutely true, Well,
you need to trust your circle so that you can learn to trust what you're receiving for yourself in the beginning, because it feels weird. It feels like it's your own thoughts. You think, well, I could have said that. How can I prove that's come from some other power? And so when somebody in your circle says, well, there was a couple of sentences you said there, and it felt really different to everything else, or there was one word you kept using, you've never used it before, little things like that, which were very objectively observed, they're the things that give you the confidence. Oh, there's a change happening here. There's a development that's coming through here. Interestingly now, Kathy, with some of the work I'm doing with the university, I've been doing a lot of trance work while wearing an EEG cap. So the brainwaves have been measured during the trance work. And they can measure when the spirit world joins us. They can measure the gamma waves when the spirit world joins us. And so they know when our own logic is not functioning, and yet there is logic in what we're saying and doing through gamma waves. I'd love to have had that when I was a beginner. That would have given you such confidence when you're a beginner.
Yes, I've been hearing a lot about that. I think Warren did an interview, I cannot remember when, where there's a lot of research being done with that now. Something along those lines. So that is really cool. And that would totally give the confidence, when I know when you first started, you had one guide that you eventually got to know. Do you have more than one guide, or is this the guide that usually stays with you the whole time?
No, I've had one chap all the time. He does everything. I give him a holiday a few weeks a year. I tell him he can go off to Lanzarote or somewhere like that. I do work with trance work with loved ones. So where someone's brother, mother may come and use me. And I've also had visitors for healing. But probably 95% of my work is with one guide. Although he's changed in format, if you like, over the years as our relationship has changed, but most definitely only the one. And a few years back, I said to the spirit world, if you want me to do all of this public work, because I do a lot of big public demonstrations and very open sittings, I said, you've got to leave him with me. I don't, we have such a good relationship, then leave it alone. So I do believe you can make these contracts, Kathy, with the spirit world. A lot of students, when I say, have you told the spirit world you're not happy about that? And they'd say, are we allowed to? and I do believe this is a two-way cooperation. If you're communicating with the spirit world, they're not just downloading to you, you're actually in communication with them. You're having a relationship with them. So I always say I change my contract annually with the spirit world. We have a few new clauses.
That's good. That is really good to know. There's two things. One, I hear from everybody. Everybody says, why do you want to be the trance medium? Why do you want to be the physical medium? Why don't you just be the sitter? Because then you get all the, the information from the spirit world. You can ask all the questions. So that's something I hear all the time. Why waste your time? Just be the sitter for them, because you're going to get so much information. Do you recall when you're sitting in trance, do you recall anything? Are you in a light, medium, or deep state?
Well, there we get a very long discussion because with my work with the scientists, I'm realizing that actually even in the deepest state of trance, we have the potential to know what is happening. But we actually choose through a thing called selective amnesia. We choose to say it's not important and therefore we won't remember it. Because we choose not to remember it, it is in our memory. But it's so far back in the filing system that it's somehow lost. So in actual fact, every trance medium has downloaded everything they've ever done. It's there somewhere. Therefore, it has an effect in the deep subconscious. So even though we may not readily be aware of it, we do know what's been said. And what I've found over the years is that suddenly you find yourself talking with a knowledge that you haven't learned, or a different perspective that you don't remember changing your perspective, or a wisdom that you think, well, do you know, that doesn't make sense to me in my everyday life, so why am I saying that? And I realise it's because we're deeply processing everything we've received. So do I know what's been said? Do I remember what's been said? Sometimes. But actually, scientifically, probably every time. Everything.
That's actually good. I like how you said that, because anything that happens to you, I know that there's a record. There's a record. You store that in a filing cabinet somewhere. You can access those things if you wanted to go into self-hypnosis or hypnosis.
Yep.
And maybe grab it or through the dreams. But yeah, it's beautiful how you describe that you can somehow sometimes start talking and realize, wait, where's this coming from? Or, but It's all within you. So I love how you describe that.
I think it's important to talk about it, Kathy, for me, is a lot of students don't develop because they think, well, I know what I'm saying. I can hear what I'm saying. It must be me. And then they give up because they think they're not getting far enough out of the way. And I like to teach them that scientifically, they will always know what they've said. There will be some knowing there somewhere. So it makes it much kinder, the journey of development. You know, they're not so hard on themselves. So, okay, today I remember a lot. Today I heard a lot. But that's okay, because tomorrow I will remember less and I will hear less. And maybe there will never be a day when I don't remember anything. But that's okay. So I think if we give them the science that supports it, and certainly I know this last 2 years that I've been working closely with scientists, I've had a boost in my confidence, even after all these years. You know, I remember when the very first chap that came after the experiment and said to me, Sheila, it's impossible what you've just done. That was the best validation that I'd had in 28 years of work. To say it's impossible, scientifically impossible, to have the brain waves you've just had and do what you've just done. So we all need this boost all the time, you know, this recognition, just to keep us going. So I think it's kinder to accept that you probably will know what you've said and done, and sometimes you won't.
I totally agree with that. You know, there's times with me, I'll remember things, and then times I'm like, I don't remember what happened. But yeah. I'm going to ask a question because I know somebody's going to ask the question, where can you get the cap? Is there a cap? Is there something that they can get, or a teacher?
Yeah. I'm in discussions, although they're not talking very well to me. It's an American company. I can put online the details of the company afterwards. I have got it. But they're not very good communicators. But you can buy the caps. I think if I remember, it was about $1,500 between, yes. But it's the programming on the computer to be able to process the information. You need a license for that. I can access it because I'm working with the universities at the moment. But you need to buy into the license. So it would probably be better if a group of people got together and bought into the license. Wow. But I can certainly share the details with you. And it was quite simple to use once we had it set up. The guy we were working with from the university had to go home one evening. And he said, I'll leave it with you. I'll just show you what to do. And it was quite easy to use and to read. But it's the programming for the computer that costs the money.
Yes, it sounds like it will be costly, but yeah, definitely get us the details, because you never know, there's going to be somebody that wants it, and people coming together, that might be a great thing too.
Well, and he bought his second-hand, he told me. So sometimes university students have bought them for their own work or their own research and then sold them on. So, you know, somebody might find one like that.
If you can remember this, and when you first started blending with your guide, and do you know your guide's name?
I do. He's known as Light.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you remember how it first felt to blend?
Yes, absolutely. It's a bit like everything that's your first time. You remember the details, don't you? I was doing a meditation, a guided meditation, but one of those that's rather like an exercise. It was given to me by a teacher. I was in a group at the Arthur Findlay College, and we were given an opportunity to sit by a lake and meet someone from the spirit world. And in that moment, I had that very atypical experience. It felt like someone was coming into me. I know now that doesn't happen, but that's what it felt like. And I felt like a man. But what was most significant was it felt normal. And it should have felt weird and scary. And it didn't. And you know, Kathy, I was so lucky. I had a lady who sadly no longer teaches, a lady called Marcia Day. And as she went round the group asking them of their experience, they were all describing their meditation. She came to me and I said, well, my experience wasn't like that. I felt like I became a man. And I felt like that I'd disappeared and this man had come and taken over where I was. And you know what was so lucky? She just said to me, oh, that's normal. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy it. And she never made any fuss at all. So over that first week, it built. And every day she kept saying to me, did you enjoy that? Oh, it's normal, don't worry. And I bless her really, because she gave me chance to get used to it in my own way without using words like trance or overshadowing or channeling or any of those things. She just taught me it was part of meditation, really, and nothing unusual. And it was only once I'd got used to it, probably maybe even my second or third week, that people started to speak about me as a trance medium. And I'm so grateful for that, really.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good opening and welcoming to that energy, because a lot of people I talk to have that a similar experience. And then the teacher comes in and says, oh, you don't do that here, that's trance, and we don't do that. And they make it almost fearful also.
Exactly.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful experience, and
very lucky. Yeah,
a beautiful teacher to do that for you. When you got to know your guide, did information come through others for more details, or was this just something that you got to know through him?
Just say that to me again, Kath. I'm not quite sure what you asked me there.
So a lot of people, as they're getting to know their guide that comes through, most of the information, some people, in their circle, all the information comes from the sitters.
I understand. Yeah.
Did you get it from them, or was this during the meditations, the ongoing sitting?
Yeah, I understand. All of the information I had early on were from my experiences with the spirit world. So I collected it, if you like, as a story. And if I asked the right questions, I would get answers from teachers. And then with my circle, for a long while, we had no spoken word, just the blending became better and better. And then as I began to get feedback from the circle and I learnt the skill of speaking, then I got information about the quality of what was being said. But when I started some 30 years ago, people used to have suitcases full of guides, literally. You'd have a guide for healing, a guide for breathing, a guide for getting up in the morning, a guide telling you what to wear. Everybody had like 10 or 15 guides, and they were always these very big characters, North American chiefs, Buddhist monks, nuns, big stories. And I kept thinking, but I don't feel that with mine. I don't feel any of those things. So in my head, I was determined that I would learn who I was working with myself. I didn't want anybody else to tell me. And I think once you have those thoughts, then people don't, you somehow put up a barrier that people don't feed you information. And I just built a relationship based on energy, on love, just love. And I knew it was a man, and that was all I knew. I have to tell you, to this point in time, personally, clairvoyantly, I've only seen a small part of him, never seen the whole of him. But I worked with some very good clairvoyants who began to give me information. But this was like 10 years after I started. So I was already confident in my relationship when I began to be given the pictures that would fit my feelings. And so I was comfortable the pictures they were giving me were correct. I do an exercise, Kathy, and it's quite an important one for your listeners to perhaps think about. And I always pick 3 people in the class, and I say to them, tell me who you would think of if I said, think of someone very spiritual. So we'll get names like Gandhi, Mandela, the Pope, Mother Teresa, Princess Diana, names like that, well-known names that you would instantly think spiritual. And I say, if the spirit world comes, they have no body anymore. Their body is gone. They are an energy. So if Kathy Beltrame sees an energy or feels an energy that is spiritual, she may be inspired, it's like Princess Diana. Somebody else may see it and say, it's like Mandela. And yet neither of you are wrong. They're both very spiritual energies that had great similarities. So I like the idea that a student or myself, you have a relationship first and then somebody else confirms it to you. And I always say, if you hear it 3 times from 3 different people, that's good confirmation. And I have a lot of sitters will come to me for private sittings and say, tell me who my guide is. And I say, I can't do that for you. If you tell me who your guide is, I'll go have a look and see if I agree with you or not. And I don't always agree. But if they don't know who it is, then I don't tell them.
Wow.
Because I don't really have a person. I have an energy of love. Although I do now have a personality a bit more with him.
Well, you know what? I've talked to so many different people. Some I haven't interviewed. They say very similar things that you're saying here, but they all agree that that energy that comes, you will get validation later. It doesn't have to come now. It can come much later. So I love that you brought that up. Definitely love that.
Something I need to say, Kathy, with our lovely conversation here, everything we discuss is just my opinion, of course, from my experience. So somebody else will want and need a chief, an Indian chief. That's what they will need to have a relationship. So I'm not saying any of the other things are wrong. I'm just giving you my personal answers.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Some I've listened to different seances and different mediums, and their guides they're just regular people, they did, actually anybody that's come has done wonderful work, but they're not famous. They're not, so it's beautiful. Whatever comes to you, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
In the beginning, do you think it's important for people to set the intention when they're sitting? Are they sitting to develop trance? Is that the intention they should have every time they sit?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can develop more than one form of mediumship at a time, but you're not going to develop them in one session. So it's very important that you have intention. And the best way I can describe it is if you drive your car out of your drive, you have to decide, are you going left or right? Even if you're just going for a drive, you've got to decide left or right. You can't say to the car, you choose, do you want to go left or right? So it's always important to have an intention, just because then every experience you have, you can measure against your intention. So this, even if you have a clairvoyant experience when you're sitting for trance, you can use it to talk about your trance development. I'm not far enough in trance because I'm still having a clairvoyant experience. Because otherwise, you'll confuse yourself. What should your experience be like? Your own individual experience be? So that you know, even when the energy is not so good for you, you know what you need to go, whether you're going to turn left or right. So I think intention is very important in all forms of mediumship. And it's just a thought.
It's just a thought, yeah. Do you demonstrate your trance publicly or just for your students?
No, I demonstrate publicly, sometimes to quite large audiences as well. And we will always have questions and answers during those public demonstrations. And there will always be some form of teaching, some form of philosophy within it as well. Yeah.
Is this the public demonstrations? Do you have this posted on the website?
They're usually, because most of my work is abroad, most of my public demonstrations are in Europe. So it's advertised through the variety of schools there. Although a colleague and I are planning to set up a tour of public demonstrations in England, where we want to call it a discussion with the spirit world. So instead of questions and answers from the congregation, the audience, maybe where we have some more scientific questions and things like that as well. So maybe have a panel that are going to ask questions of the spirit world, a bit more experimental. All in the process now because of this work I'm doing with the universities.
Do you have a certain routine to prepare yourself to go and to do these demonstrations?
Yes, it's nothing really very clever. For me, I don't like to eat too much because I find if I've eaten, then I'm heavy and I'm sleepy, so then I'm fighting with sleep. So for me, during the day, I would eat very little. If I'm doing physical, I would eat nothing. But if I'm doing trance, I would eat very little. I like to be very energetic before. So some lively music, a walk, a good laugh. I don't like to withdraw. Some people like to withdraw before. I don't. I like to feel quite bubbly and quite energetic. And I like to prepare a room myself. Not because I have to have my chair here or the window there, but it's almost like putting your uniform on to go to work. So by preparing my own room, getting my own water, things like that, it's getting me already in the frame of mind that I'm working. So nothing particularly special, no deep meditations. I'm usually chattering away to the spirit world in my head, maybe putting some music on before I even enter the room that I like. Don't like all that nice, quiet, love and light music before trance for me. So if somebody's put that on, then I go and put a bit of rock on. But it's just my personal buzz, really. That's all I'm trying to create. And certainly no telephone or, really earthly thoughts immediately before.
Do you, can you remember, or how does it feel? What are the physical sensations that you feel while going into trance? And how do you feel afterwards when you come back?
These have changed very much over the years. So if I was talking as a beginner, they felt quite extreme. The breath would be very extreme, the changes in my breath, because I used the breath as a technique, but they would be spontaneously quite long, quite deep. Physically, I would feel very heavy. I would feel the blending in quite an extreme way, not an uncomfortable way, but in a very dominant and very positive way. But now, I have to say, and I can remember a time when this almost worried me because it became so subtle. Now, the actual blending itself is just, hello, okay, let's get on with this. And as I close my eyes and I begin my breath, I'm already in that love. So I just slip into it now. So there's a period where I thought, am I in trance? Because it became so subtle. But the spoken word proved how much I was in trance. Afterwards, I have to say, always I felt fantastic. Always energized, always. Annoyingly so, because sometimes your sitters feel very tired because you've taken energy from them, and actually I want to go party. So really always brilliant. If I'm tired, if I sit for 10 minutes to trance, I'll feel better afterwards.
Wow. So I'm looking at all my questions. I'm trying to make sure I don't double ask you something because we talked about it. Do you, for those times where you don't have recall, do you know where you might go? Or is there a place that you've created or the guides take you to while you're in a deeper state of trance? Do you have any recall there?
For me, I would be observing my technique, which is just observing my breath. So I don't go anywhere. I don't have any pictures. What we've measured with the brain measurements is that the creative part of my brain and the logical part of my brain is almost ceased functioning, almost completely ceased functioning. So I would need those active to have thoughts and to have pictures. So I'm in a place of nothing, but I'm not even aware of the nothing. But I'm usually in trance, not so much physical, but in trance I'm aware of the breath. So I'm following the breath, literally, and the breath changes by itself, and I follow the breath. And then the recall, it's not a case of no recall, it's a case of no listening. So there is nothing to recall afterwards at that point. Although I'm talking, I'm not aware of hearing. So that's why there's no recall.
Did you, in the beginning or sometime later on, start to record as your circle, record the your sitting so that you could listen later as things were happening? Did you do that?
Yeah. No, I've never done it because I hate to listen to myself afterwards.
Me too.
And because, particularly as a teacher, I am so judgmental of myself. So there was a period where I could have easily destroyed my work. So occasionally students, we've had some private sittings where there've been extra voices or things like that on their phenomena. And they said, oh, you've got to listen to this sitting, you've got to listen to this sitting. And I just listened to that bit and nothing else. But what we have got is quite a few philosophies have been transcribed afterwards. So I've read them. I can read them afterwards, but I can't listen to them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have to listen to the interviews over and take notes later. And my voice, I just can't handle it. And I'm like, what was the question? But, yeah, so I totally get that.
Personal again, I think, Kathy. Very personal.
Oh my goodness. How long did it take, in the beginning before you started speaking?
So I had probably 3 full weeks of training, and over a period of a year that would have been. And then my circle was once a week, but the speaking came towards the end of the first year. But the beginning of the speaking, within probably 5 or 6 days, the beginning, but what I now realise was probably 99% me, where now it's been measured as, the university just measured it as 98% spirit world.
Wow.
I'm still working on the other 2%.
Oh my goodness.
We've had because the logic is so still, the university is saying it's 98% spirit world.
Amazing. I just said to have that technology, I'm sure, seeing, all the information that comes through it, definitely the boost in confidence.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, this is a question I ask all the time, and everybody has different thoughts on it. I know with your experience that you were sitting, and then the sitters were starting to, sit for you.
Yep.
Some people, ask, can all members of a trance circle sit at the same time in the energy and allow spirit to decide who goes into trance? Or should just one person be developing out of all of them?
I think the problem when everybody sits, or maybe just a circle leader doesn't sit, is that in people's minds, they'll be measuring everything, that every experience they're having, they'll be measuring it. Is it going to be me? Oh, it must be me. Maybe it's not me. So what you're doing is you're giving your mind something to think about. And what you're trying to do in trance is to give your mind nothing to think about. So I think a circle can be for everyone to develop, but it should be, well, this week it's you 3, or you 2 now, then in 20 minutes you 2, or 1, then 1, then 1. So there's some sort of structure within it to give the freedom to the medium sitting to not have to worry, is it my turn? Am I looking for a measurement? I believe there can be enough energy for everybody to sit. Mm-hmm. My own development at the beginning was everybody in the class sat when I was at the Arthur Findlay College. But not everybody had time to speak. So when you got the words in your head, you were thinking, am I supposed to be speaking or am I not in trance? So you were questioning things more than you needed to. And I think by having a structure or a focus on a medium or 1 or 2 mediums, even if only for 20 minutes, you can release them from some of the thoughts, the measuring thoughts that they would have. In the old days, if we go back even before I started, everybody sat for one medium. You know, everybody, it was a circle for a medium. But the modern world is everybody wants to develop. So I think a structure of any sort is better. Yeah.
That's good. You know, here, you know, I'm in the States. So in the beginning, I found it very hard because as I was talking to more people, there was some confusion between channeling and the trance. And, you know, sitting in different circles, you know, for their first time, you know, I think that some people had that beautiful experience of going into trance really quick, you know, like for the first time, then after that they have to develop and stuff like that. But what I noticed is that channelers tend to immediately start talking, and there's that confusion. Am I a trance medium or am I channeling? And have you experienced that with different channelers and trance mediums?
So my experience is limited to what I've heard about the States or what I've observed in developing trance mediums. So for me, channeling is how you've described it. It's close inspiration, but there's still the mind of the medium there, the logic of the medium there. Where the trance medium, later on in their development, is trying to have as little of their mind present. Now, if we look at people like JFK, Mandela, Martin Luther King, there are pieces of speeches that the whole world remembers. And yet we saw Mandela, Martin Luther King and JFK. We didn't see the spirit world. And I believe that those people are channeled. I think they've had a blending that's inspired certain sentences that when they've spoken them, there's a power behind them that the whole world has recognised but not realised it's outside of the individual. Do you understand? Whereas the trance medium is trying to have nothing of the human thought and the human perspective. They're trying to have all spirit. Are they better or worse? This is where it's difficult, Kathy, and forgive me, because all the channeling stories I hear aren't good. All the trance stories I hear are quality. So for me, I think channeling is a state of trance, but lighter. And I think if channelers were further out of the way, I think they would have more quality. But I think they still contain inspiration from the spirit world. So a channeler's philosophy is different to the man in the street's philosophy. So it has a quality for me. But I haven't really witnessed it firsthand. So I'm only giving it to you from stories or from experiences of students that I've had, really. And I think here in England, we don't use the word channeling. We tend to use trance and a closer blending or a lighter blending. And can I just also say, here in England, closer blending and lighter blending doesn't mean that the medium is more unconscious. It just means they're giving more of their thoughts over. For instance, a colleague of mine does quality trance, but he sits in a lighter state of trance than I do, but he still has good quality because it's the way that his mind works. My mind is very, very curious, so I need less of my mind, otherwise I will interfere. I will dilute what's being said. And I think a lot of trainee mediums, and I've seen it on your posts, they think that you have to be in deep trance to be quality. And I think the state of trance is to do with the medium, not to do with the quality of what's produced. And I think a lot of mediums think they're not good enough because they're not in deep trance.
Yeah. There is a lot of that, you know, the different states, the light, medium, and the deep, and different pioneers being in different states.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, so that does, you know, and then the channeling part, yeah, there, you know, I think with me here, it was very hard in the beginning because I was trying to figure out what somebody was doing or talking about, and I realized, wait, they're talking about channeling, even though I do love channeling. I love the information that comes through that. I realized that it was two separate things that was happening. And so I had to like kind of separate that within the group because we were talking about trance here. Yeah. And yeah, so that's just an interesting thing that I like to kind of throw out there to the guests. But you described it beautifully. I love how you described the difference. What has been the biggest mistake that you have made in your development?
I've got to think about that one. I think the biggest mistake for me was early on with lack of patience, really. Needing to be perfect before it was possible to be perfect. Needing to not understand what was being said before it was practically possible to be at that place. And when I had teaching, the teaching that I had from teachers here, not the spirit teachers here, wasn't the teaching that taught technique. It was a sort of teaching that gave you the chance to have an experience and to discuss it. I didn't have feedback ever. As a teacher now, I always give students feedback so that they can have understanding as well as experience. I had lots of experiences, I didn't have lots of understanding. So I was very, very impatient. And that held me back, I think, for a long while. And I see it in students now, you know, well, I've been doing this for a year, you know, maybe it's not for me because I'm not very good. No, hang on, you've had a difficult year in your ordinary life. That's going to reflect in your development. Your health's not been good. That's going to reflect in your development. Just because you love the spirit world, it can't happen tomorrow, you know. What we're trying to do as trance mediums is to shut down everything that's natural as a human being. Logic and judgment is what makes us human. And we're trying to switch that off. You know, you can't say to your brain, hey, stop doing what you've been trained for the last 20, 40, 60 years. Stop doing that and do something different. It can't do that. We are human. The natural part of it is that we're also spirit. But because we're in a human body, we've got to teach our brain there isn't something else it can do that can give us a different experience. And I like something you said to me earlier. You said, often people have a good experience at the beginning and then have to work at it. And that is so true, Kathy, because you haven't learned how to get it wrong at the beginning. You just have the experience. Then you start trying to have the experience, and then you get all these bad habits, don't you? You know?
It's like every time you have to sit, you have no expectation. So whatever experience you do have, it would be like, wow, you know? So, but then, yeah, so every time you do sit, you're trying to replicate what you just experienced the last time. So,
the Spirit World once gave me an experiment to do. I do a bit of training with colleagues every now and then. If we're working together, we say, oh, when the students have gone to bed, we'll sit and have a little practice with each other because you have less chance to do your own training. And the Spirit World once asked us to sit in trance, but not do technique and think nothing. So this is before we've gone in. So we can't have technique to go in. We've got to sit in a chair and think nothing. That's all they wanted us to achieve. And we lasted about 3 minutes.
I believe it.
Because you start observing, am I doing nothing?
Yes.
You know, am I getting this right?
Oh,
and you couldn't do it. You just couldn't do it. So you had to have technique. Mm-hmm. So even when you have technique, you then got to learn to ignore the technique. Mm-hmm. So patience was my biggest mistake, really. Not having enough.
Oh my goodness, yes, I would be the same way. What has been the most difficult thing to overcome in your development?
Yeah, for me, the more I've worked, the more hypersensitive I've become in my everyday emotions and my everyday awareness. I'm very, very good at when I'm working, when I'm not, I'm not. I'm a Capricorn, you know, I like to get out in the garden, in the dirt, walk the dog. So when I work, when I don't. This is very unusual for me. This is a day off and I'm talking mediumship. And that's unusual for me. But your emotions and your awarenesses become so hypersensitive that actually you don't always fit into society. You actually feel different. And that took me a lot of work over many years, and personal pain, and people could hurt me very easily. And I had to realise that I had to stand as an individual and learn to be who I am in order to carry on. And I think that's probably an ongoing problem, and I know some colleagues who feel the same. When you work so much, it can actually be, although you're in this love when you're working, it can be quite isolating in everyday life. Even your students or your colleagues don't necessarily know how you feel. So yeah.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people can relate to that. I mean, I can relate to that, you know. Now, this is an interesting, so I'm using different words here because somehow the verbiage has changed a little bit. Do you have any advice on how to go deeper or higher? I'm going to say deeper or higher now.
Yeah, I like that.
Into trance to let your guides have more control, or with the blending.
Yep. And I really like the way you use the deeper or higher. That gives people the option of how the experience would be. You know, I've got some very down-to-earth advice. Maybe your students would like a magic pill to achieve it. I know mine would. But actually, you have to learn who you are. You have to learn your wants and needs. What are you getting out of this sitting? I don't mean the individual sitting, but this development. What do you need out of it? What is your ego? Everybody has one. What part does it play? How honest are you with yourself? All those painful things, you know, all those hard work things. I think as you work on those, then when you're sitting in your technique, whatever your technique is, it is easier to relinquish more of your own personality. You know, it's not about trying to be a better medium or trying to have a better technique. It's trying to say, this is my personality. I give up my personality so that I can be influenced more. But I would say whatever technique people use, for me it was the breath. It was very mechanical. This breath followed by this breath. Learn it so well before you change it, so that it becomes so natural that you're doing it without thinking about it. Because everybody has a technique. Well, however simple it is, everybody has a technique. If you focus on the technique, you are using brain waves that you can't give to the spirit world. There's not the bigger space in your brain that you want to give the spirit world. So whatever technique you've got, you want to keep it for a very long while until it becomes natural before you change anything. Too many students say, this hasn't worked, I'll try this. Oh, did this music, like when you put the music on, everybody was taking each other's pieces of music. And if you change music every week, you're giving your brain something different to listen to, you know? So you're not giving the brain chance to be quiet, which is what it's got to achieve. So even if you don't like a piece of music, stick with it for a few sittings before you decide it's not right. I told you, for me, we found it was one song, one sentence, one word, one note in the end that did the best job. And the rest of the song wasn't important. So too many people hear something good and say, I'll try that. And they actually haven't given enough chance. I always say to students who come to the first ever workshop, Kathy, today won't be your best day in trance, because today you will be doing what I tell you to do. That means you have to remember what I've told you to do, and you have to do it. All I'm teaching you today on the first day is a technique. Tomorrow you won't think about it so much. Next week you won't think about it so much. but today's not going to be your best day. And I do find that, and I notice with some of the people on the thread, they're looking for the magic pill to try. And actually maybe they haven't tried enough at the one they're doing until it becomes so natural. You know, right now, you're breathing, but you're not thinking about it. But actually there is a whole process going on in your body and your brain that is keeping you breathing. And your trance has got to be that natural, where you do it without any thought at all, you know?
Yeah, I can totally understand what you're saying there. I had thought of a question and I completely forgot about it, but there was one thing I wanted to ask you. Okay, most people say as they're trying to learn to go higher or deeper, to allow the control to deepen, everybody says this one thing. They say that really it's about learning about you, your energy, everything's about you in the beginning.
Yeah.
And they want to go straight to the guide, but it's really learning to understand your own energy. But I loved how you brought up the ego. I loved how the thoughts, the breathing. Trust me, I've tried everything. I'm thinking about all these different things, and I'll try a different technique, and then I go back to the same one that I typically use. One thing I like to ask is, you know, learning more about us now, you know, in the beginning of developing, is spirituality, evolving, growing within yourself important? Do you find that in being important?
It's a good question, a really good question. I think we could probably spend a whole interview defining what is spirituality, couldn't we?
We could.
And we'd probably have a wonderful argument with all the discussions that would come on the thread afterwards, wouldn't we, where people would agree and disagree with us. I think if we put spirituality in a very general statement, which is recognizing that we are spirit, primarily we are spirit. And if we can have some perception of what that is, that there is this cooperation between a physical body and the spirit we are. In other words, we know everything. You know, we were born knowing everything, we will die knowing everything that's available to us. Do we have access to it? Certainly not in this life. If we had full access to our spiritual nature, we probably couldn't even cope with life itself. So I don't think you have to go into, do you meditate every day? Do you believe in God? Do you have some religious belief that goes with it? I think, or some deep philosophy. Are you kind to animals? I don't think we have to go into those sorts of things. They're personal expressions of spirituality. But I do think you have to recognize your own spirit. And if we call that spirituality, in that there is a power in me that could speak as well as my guide, if only my logic wouldn't get in the way. Because my own spirit may have been a guide before, or may be a guide in the future. But for now, I need this discarnate spirit because I trust it as a higher knowledge, because I have this clumsy logic that gets in the way. So is spirituality important? Yes, if we define it as our own spirit. And then how you express your own spirit is your own personal responsibility. I've known some not very nice people who were good trance mediums.
Wow.
I've known some people who have faked their trance and equally had some very good trance.
Wow.
To me, that is something to do with their own, a distortion in their own spirituality. And then people say to me, well, why haven't the spirit world stopped working with them? But the spirit world know why they're like that. They understand what's happened in the ego, that they behave like that. So the spirit world see it with kindness, not with judgment like we do. So I think what we see as spiritual and what's spiritual maybe are two different things, you know?
I've actually just listened to something about what you're just describing, about how spirit, our guides, still work with us, even if we're a bit on our ego and, you know, whatever, but it's all a personal thing. It's all your personal lessons, you know, the things that are going on within you. But I love how you brought that up, and, you know, me just listening to that just the other day. So Sheila, in your circle, have you experienced like the healing, trance healing? Have you went into that area?
Yeah. I was late coming to the trance healing. Not sure why, really. I was a little resistant at the beginning. I think I needed more proof. For me, when I gave philosophy, I couldn't do any harm. I know that's not true now, but I couldn't do any harm with philosophy, where if I got healing wrong, I could do harm. So I think there was a bit of resistance to me. So I was later coming to the trance healing, but completely taught by the spirit world. No workshops, no lessons. So I followed what was natural. And I think in my world over here, I'm seen as a bit controversial because I will use the spoken word during trance healing, and there will be hand movements and manipulation, where the majority of trance healers over here now will not have the spoken word and will keep the hands still or not touch at all. Mine, it's not designed, I don't intend to speak, I don't intend to move my hands. I just say to the spirit world, I have these skills in trance, if you want them, you can use them. And they usually do. So I'm a little bit controversial with my trance healing. And I know that. So I always tell my students, this is what I do. If you like it, then you can do it as well. If you don't like it, then I'm comfortable for you to do it in whatever way you feel comfortable. So I don't tend to see too many clients. I tend to only demonstrate it, mostly again because I don't have time. But we have quite good results with it. So, but completely taught by the spirit world. I'd never seen really a trance healer work. So it just came naturally. I was giving private sittings where I would be speaking, and then the spirit world would want to use hands as well. So we just slowly brought it in.
Well, I think it's just like anything else. There's so many different ways, like with the healing. It doesn't have to be just one way that it comes in.
Yeah.
Spirit, it's like, I love how you said it, spirit taught, spirit bringing through that information. So I love how you described that.
What we do need to add here, Kathy, just for a moment, for English people watching, in England, because of insurance for giving healing, there are a lot of rules and regulations. And if any healers who watch this are doing trance healing, there are certain healing environments where you're not allowed to do trance, so you can only do spiritual healing. There are a lot of healing environments where you're not allowed to touch and you're not allowed to speak. So sometimes they don't have the free will because they're working within an insurance system that has rules. So although I advocate it, that's at my risk that I do those things. So we don't want people to feel inadequate if they're not allowed to do that.
There's a lot of rules over there on that, you know?
Healing. Yeah.
I loved talking with you. Right now, I think we're like almost an hour and a half. And this is part one, guys, okay? I have like 2 sets of questions here. And if we continue doing this, we're going to go into 3 hours here. So I'm doing part 2 at a later date. But my God, I love your energy. And I have to tell you, your statue behind you.
Yep.
I saw it in the very beginning. I forgot to mention it to you. I had the exact same one.
Okay.
Beautiful. Your energy is beautiful, Sheila. I loved everything you shared. You're just so, and everybody told me, oh, you're going to love talking with Sheila because she'll make you laugh and make you feel very comfortable. And I feel that way with you. Thank you so very much for doing this today. And on your day off, I will say that again. But it's beautiful. All the information you shared, I loved. It's your understanding, everything. I could relate to so much of it. But I want to tell you guys again. So you can connect with Sheila at www.ershamstar, ershamstar.co.uk. That will be in the post. I will get the CDs that Sheila has. I believe there's 5. And Sheila wants to also, I want to bring up the conference that you guys are going to have. So if you could share a little bit about that right now.
Okay, so I will have some advertising material shortly, but I've been working extensively with 6 universities over here, And with one neuroscientist, we've powered up now. He's doing a research program in May through my school using my students. But we've decided we're going to run what we think will be a unique conference. So in June 2019, the 8th and 9th of June 2019, we're going to do a cross-discipline scientific conference. So there'll be live mediumistic experiments, live healing experiments. We've got a gentleman from America coming over who's going to join us to do an experiment with life between lives. We've got some heart frequency therapists. We've got somebody who has ancient knowledge of the paranormal. And we're going to introduce a lot of disciplines which are going to be questioned and tested by scientists. And these are not paranormal scientists, they are neuroscientists. So they're looking at what is the brain waves do? What are the brain waves doing? Do they prove that mediumship, contact with the spirit world, healing is taking place? A really exciting conference. And if people keep an eye on my website, or I'll put it on yours when it comes up, the advertising will be out very shortly. And we're going to be having people coming from all over the world to England.
Wow.
So,
sounds exciting. And I'm going to tell you this.
Very exciting.
All the stuff that's happening is on the other side.
Then come and see us.
I know. I'm going to have to do one of those big trips where I hit everything, and meet everybody. That's what I want to do. That's like on my bucket list, really.
Good. You'll be very welcome.
So, yes, definitely share that within the group when that advertisement gets done. And again, guys, this is part 1. Look forward to a part 2 and where we talk about Sheila's ongoing physical mediumship development. So that's going to be a wonderful interview as well. So Sheila, thank you. I know this is 5 hours ahead. So you're like almost 5 o'clock there.
Yep.
So I wish you a fabulous rest of your day. And again, guys, thank you. Kathy Beltran with Sacred Dancer Trance. And Sheila, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, hold on, Sheila, okay? I totally forgot to tell you to hold on.